Hi everyone, my name is JoJo and welcome back to the channel, or if it's your first time here, hi, welcome, come on in, have a seat, welcome to some weird, cool, quirky art. So, if you couldn't tell, I don't look like I'm about to do a makeup look. That's because you are talking to future JoJo, who took way too long to edit this video. Life got busy, give me a break. But this one, I actually took inspiration from one of my very early looks I did, because I've been dealing with some art block, and I was like, rather than trying to come up with a whole new concept, let's just take one of my old concepts, but do it better. Or not. We'll find out. Well, you'll find out. Anyways, I'm not going to sit here and ramble too much longer with you, so let's get into the video. Alrighty, so to start, I am going to glue down just one of my eyebrows for this half that is going to be this skull side. So the original inspiration for this look was something like Life and Death. I don't know if this one quite has that vibe, but definitely more of like your really pretty like florals, which I actually painted this time, and then I did the skull side. So I start off for the skull, I am going to start by sketching it out to get a general outline of where I think things are going to be, and I'll go back in and add more details later. So I do start sketching out this chest and the neck piece to try and give me like some vertebrae, and then our sternum, and then start getting in like a collarbone and some ribs, which I end up redoing this a few times. I don't even think I show all the times I redid this, but I struggled with just getting a sketch that I liked. Which the whole plan with this was just to get a temporary sketch down, and then go back in and add all of the details and refine it later. But when your sketch doesn't look how you're quite imagining it in your head, which I don't know what I imagined in my head at this point, you kind of just mess around and throw some things on and see what happens until it looks closer to whatever is in your head. And then I do go back in and redo this face piece after like sitting with it for a minute. I was like, it didn't feel quite right on some of the spacing and stuff. So I go back through, re-sketch it, see if I can get a shape that looks a little better, that is gonna set me up. And then there I go again, redoing the chest piece, because I go, not quite right. So I eventually get this sketch to a good enough spot that feels okay to me. So I'm going to take a break from the skull, and I'm actually going to do my base, and then I'm going to go back through and draw all of our florals is going to be the next thing I'm going to do. But I am starting with this base. I really wanted this half to look very vibrant, have a lot of color to it, feel alive and pretty, and our other side having more of that death skull kind of look, maybe not quite as vibrant. So I'm going to just go ahead and do some eyeshadow. I go in with this like purpley blue on my crease, just kind of blending that out, and then just going in and deepening that color up. And then I'm going to start to go in with more of a pinky purple kind of color, and just dragging that in on the lid, and just also adding that to the lower lid, and then going in with a yellow to have a nice bright inner corner, and then adding some shimmer on top. This is kind of like a multi chrome shimmer because I wanted some variety of color. I wanted it to have a little bit of that reflective sparkle, you know, because who can't have a pretty floral side without a little bit of sparkle? So I'm going to start by adding in these flowers. I don't even remember what I was referencing for these exactly, but just going in, starting with this really pretty, vibrant pink. And then I'm just letting that paint dry just a bit, and so I'm going to work on this next one of pretty similar in design. I will do the same kind of design flower a few times for this look, but going in for another one in a purple. And then I'm just going to go back through and add some yellow to the center of this flower to give it a little more depth and give us a little more color, since I really wanted this to be a very bright, vibrant side. And then just taking that same yellow and adding it to the purple as well. And then I'm going to go in and add kind of like a lavender. So I'm just adding in this lighter purple and then going in with some darker purple to add a little depth to it so it's not quite so flat. And then just adding this in a few different places just to start to fill some of this space out. And then I go in and add some leaves, some greenery, again just to kind of fill the space out, add a little depth, and add a little more color to this side. And then I decided to go in and add a little bit of white to the center, and then in a few spots with some of the other flowers, again just adding a little more depth to it. And I wasn't going for anything too hyper realistic with these flowers. Definitely wanted it to feel like pretty florals, but not going for a super hyper realism look here. But we are going to start working on the chest. So I am starting with this one half. I kind of wanted to mimic a little bit, and my initial thought at least was to mimic some of that shape of the skeleton. So here I placed this flower right on top of my collarbone and then added in some more flowers like that lavender and some greenery extending outward in the general direction of where my collarbone is. I don't know if it kind of reads that way in the final look, but that was my initial thought with some of this placement here. And now I am bringing some of the florals. I did want it to start to overlap and kind of be incorporated with the ribs and the sternum and stuff. So I am adding this flower here over where I've sketched, and then I'm going to go back through, and when I do the ribs and stuff, we're going to add it around this flower to make it look like it's just kind of sitting on top. And then later I'm going to add some more florals and some greenery that just kind of tucks into the ribs. So I think it kind of helped bring the two sides together because I didn't want them to feel too separated. Here I am just going in and just redefining those lines in a dark brown. I went with like a dark brown because I thought this matched better as a shade with the florals. I thought a black might be a little too contrasting for this, so I decided to go with a dark brown. And just going in and redefining those lines, going in and doing all the teeth, and then going in and starting to do some shading and shadows. I didn't quite know how I wanted to do this side at this point, but felt like I was like, all right, we'll just start with some shadows using the browns, see how this goes. And then I do the same thing of just trying to shadow in some space in that eye socket and just dragging it in towards my eye but not quite filling in the space. And then I just felt like that wasn't reading quite right for the eye socket, so I decided to just go in with some black and fill this in. And then going in and adding some white to the teeth just to highlight them and give them some depth, so it doesn't just feel like some outlines. Going in and adding some further shading into the mouth, just adding some more depth. I'm going with the black and start filling this in more because I just wanted it to feel more of a negative space. So it was at this point I'm looking at this and just kind of hating where the skull is going, and this happens sometimes. And kind of what we do at this point is I went and talked with my friend, talked with my mom, and decided, all right, we're scrapping all of it and starting over. At least I scrapped all of the eye. I wasn't in love with the shape of it, and I just wasn't loving the black, so we just took all of that off. And I also redid part of the mouth. It just felt like it wasn't reading right with the black, so I go in with this brown as to fill in this space so it doesn't, to give it some depth and to distinguish it from my skin tone just a little bit, and then going in with that darker brown that we used to outline and just smudging it in to create the shadowing for that space. And I was loving this and liking this a lot more, so I went in and just redid a lot of the skull. I just wasn't loving a lot of the shape of it, so we just went in and redid all of it. And then just doing the same thing I did with the mouth, I am going in with that lighter brown, outlining in the darker brown, and then using that to shadow the edges to create that sunken in look. And then I'm just going in with some eyeshadow just to kind of give a little more depth and shading to this. And yeah, I think this one was really like, I just didn't know where I wanted to go with it when I started, and so there was a lot of trying things and redoing things, but at this point I'm really starting to kind of see the look come together, and so we're just adding in that shadows and kind of blending everything together and getting more of that look I think I originally wanted. And then also just taking some of that eyeshadow into the mouth and giving that a little bit more depth. Here I am just going through and adding the white highlights on the edges of this skull. I really do think this just adds that like finished look to it. White highlights just have this beautiful magic of just completing a look and making everything just come together. And then at this point the teeth were just looking a little dull, so I just went in and highlighted some of the edge with a little more white just to make them pop again. And I felt like I had a lot of space and felt like the two sides weren't quite as connected as I wanted them to be. So I went in and added some like ivy vine to the look, just to kind of add a little greenery to the skull. I felt like this connected it better to the other side, since I did want to kind of make them feel cohesive and not quite so separated. And so yeah. So this is where I start intertwining the two kind of sides, having the vines tuck underneath where I'm planning this rib to go, just to give it that look like the vines just started growing over and into where the ribs are. And then to really make this feel like ivy and not just some green blobs, we're going in and adding in those veins with some yellow. and adding in those little bits of details to make this feel more like actual leaves. And then just repeating that same process onto the chest, adding in those little details. And then I'm just going back in and redefining that line for where the sternum is going to be. And then also going in and redefining and cleaning up the lines for the ribs and the collarbone. And then I'm just going in and repeating that same process that I did on the face and just filling in that negative space with this lighter brown. And then I'll go back in with the darker brown and add that shading and depth to it. And then I just ended up just not liking that I was seeing that one part of the sternum, so I just decided to wipe that off. And then went back through, added in some highlights. And then I'm just going back in and adding the last little bits of shading just to make sure everything is looking the way I want it to. And I will just go ahead and work on finishing the last final little details before the finished look. Alright everybody, here's the final look. I'm really happy with how this turned out. I think it's great. Did we struggle there in the middle? Yeah, but the whole reason I'm making this content is to kind of show the process, and sometimes the process includes scrapping a whole look or part of a look and starting over, but normally you get something really good out of it. So here we are, but I'm really happy with this. I think it turned out great. I love the flowers. I love the skull. I think it's amazing. But yeah, so if you've watched this whole video, thank you so much. And if you haven't already, please go subscribe. It really helps support the channel and make sure you get to see more content like this. Also go check out my first video if you haven't seen it already. This is the second video on the channel. But I will see you all next time.